Ladies and gentlemen, we are live. Ladies and gentlemen, we are live. We are live, ladies and gentlemen. We are live. Just let us know. Drop a message in the chat if you can hear us. Just let us know if you can hear us. We are live. Good evening, guys. Good morning. Good afternoon. Good evening, wherever you are. Welcome to the Sound of Accra podcast. Yes, we are live. We are live indeed. Just have to check. Please drop a message in the chat if you can hear us. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Just let us know if you can hear us. I'm joined today with Kwame Christian. He is the founder and the CEO of the American Negotiation Institute. What's up, Tersa? Tersa says, hey. What up, Tersa? I mean, Tevin, sorry. Tevin, thank you for your emoji. You can hear us. Great. Awesome to hear that you can hear us. I'm really excited. It's time to get the word out that we are live. So tell a friend that we are live, ladies and gentlemen. So just to let you know, if you have any questions for Kwame today, please drop them in the chat and we will get to your questions as soon as we can. We are going to have a quick discussion about Kwame's what Kwame's been up to, as he recently came on the show a couple of years ago. We're also going to see how he came to launch his new book and how the success of his new book has been going on and what he can share with his new book. And also, we're going to obviously try and discuss some other things, some exciting things. So please keep it locked at the Sound of Accra podcast. We'll be right back. Just don't go anywhere. Kwame Christian, welcome to the show. Welcome to the Sound of Accra podcast. Welcome back, actually. Yes. Welcome back.
It's great to be back, man. Listen, I was vibing out to that music. I need to get on your level. That's some cool music, man.
Yeah. That's a snippet of the music from the season 3 of the show. So that was a really good theme song right there. But I'm glad you're vibing to it, man. I'm glad you got your bestseller smile back. Brought it back. Once again, guys, if you have any questions for Kwame, please do get them into the chat and we will read them out. If you even want to join and ask him a question live on video, please let us know. And we will get you onto the show live. Absolutely. So Kwame, welcome. Before we continue, let's see what we have. So Haley says, hey everyone, looking forward to listening in. Can hear Adrian loud and clear. Thank you so much, Haley. You are appreciated. Appreciate your kind words. All right, so let's get into the show. So Kwame, look, it's been a while since we last had a conversation. I believe we had you on the show on season 2 in January 2020, and I think that was just before lockdown. I think it was just before lockdown when everything started.
Yeah. Wow. That's crazy. It feels, we're talking about COVID years. So even though it's 2 years ago, it feels like it's been 8 years, man. So I'm glad to be back.
It's great to have you back. And clearly so much has happened since, we last had a conversation. You've gone and written another book. You've launched a few more courses. You've got this amazing partnership with LinkedIn, with your podcast, and you got some wonderful, amazing things that you've achieved. So I want to continue to congratulate you and say thank you for what you're doing for us, and around the world, and also for what you're doing in the negotiation community. It's really, really amazing. And I was actually listening to one of your interviews today, and it was quite interesting because in one of the interviews that you were in today, they were talking about how essentially like how it was good to practice negotiation. So you were in a car with someone and then you're pretending to negotiate and they were kind of pretending to negotiate back. And you mentioned an interesting term about anchoring, where you have to, once you've mentioned kind of like how far you can drop low, you can then kind of like go the other way and try and get them in the middle, or something. So it's really interesting to hear all the different techniques, and you're clearly an expert. I mean, they threw everything at you, but you weren't holding anything back, and you were quite firm in your negotiation. So yeah, you're definitely appreciated in the community. Is cinnamon toast crunch still your favorite cereal?
No doubt, man. Listen, I am consistent. I am consistent. And you know what's funny about that? Ever
Yeah.
since talking about cinnamon toast crunch on the in the TED talk, like almost every presentation I go to, they have a box for me. So I haven't bought cinnamon toast crunch in a long time. It's awesome.
Oh man, that's brilliant. That's brilliant. It's good to hear it's still your favorite cereal. I'm trying to cut back on the sugar because obviously I'm getting older like you, but hey man, I want to be able to dunk every year, just like what you do, on your birthday. So gotta stay fit and healthy. So yeah, let's keep it moving. So when we had our interview on season 2, when I had you in the show in season 2, at that time, I believe we were in the midst of the George Floyd conflict, and we were in the midst of Black Lives Matter. Coincidentally, this month is Black History Month. So, and I think it's just fit. I think it's fitting that your book came out, in this kind of period, because obviously it's Black History Month, and your book came out not too long ago. Was there any kind of planning in terms of when your book was supposed to come out, in terms of like the date? Was it planned in purpose, or it's just coincidence?
It is just coincidence. But listen, if anybody asks you, just say, listen, Kwame is a mastermind. He planned it for Black History Month in the UK. It's Black History Month is in February here in the States. And I think it's really, we were trying to get the book out as quickly as possible. And we started these conversations in the fall of 2020. That's when we
Mhm.
actually started negotiating with different publishers and things like that. And the traditional publishing route is very different from self-publishing. Self-publishing, complete control. You put it out when you want to, but it's been really cool to do it on their terms and at their pace. It's a bit slower and more deliberate, but I think the end product is ultimately better. And I'm just happy that it ended up dropping at a time that made sense.
Yeah, I guess it's a coincidence. I mean, it is wonderful when the timing that your book has dropped out, it has been released. Yeah, I think for those of you who aren't aware, Kwame Christian has released a new book, and it's called How to Have Difficult Conversations About Race. And essentially, it basically, I've over the past few years, in recent years, I mean, I think this has become a lot more important. And I felt during the time, maybe a year or two ago, when all the protests and the riots were happening around George Floyd, I felt that it was kind of quite significant to have those kind of conversations. And what's provoked you to kind of like release this kind of book now?
Yeah, so it's what I want to do with my books and the content, whether it's the podcast or whatever it happens to be, is I want to be where the toughest conversations are. Because
Yeah.
the way I think about it is, if you can handle yourself in a conversation on the topic of race, which is very, very sensitive, then you can handle yourself in any difficult conversation. And I was doing recording the audio book, which is a lot harder than I thought it was going to be. Sitting there just reading. But the sound engineer who was producing the book, he was really interested because he said, "Wow, the tools that you give in this book, I could obviously use it in a difficult conversation about race, but I could use it in any difficult conversation. This is really helpful." And
Yeah.
that's what I really wanted to do, because I want to make sure that the tools that people get from the book are portable. It's not just for this narrow situation. I want you to be
Yeah.
able to apply it in any aspect of your life too.
Excellent. And I think one common theme in a lot of your talks and your books is the compassionate curiosity framework. And of course, I believe it's quite flexible, so you've been able to kind of use it in this book as well. I believe I've not read the book yet, but from what I've seen from some of the highlights, of course, you do go into that a little bit. So for the benefit of those listening or watching, Kwame, who aren't aware of the compassionate curiosity framework, could you quickly just recap what that is in terms of a negotiation framework?
Yeah, so this is a framework that you can use in all of your difficult conversations, whether you're at work or at home. And so it's 3 steps. First, acknowledge and validate the emotions. Second, get curious with compassion. And then third, joint problem solving. But it's designed not only for every single difficult conversation you have, it's also used as a tool of introspection, a tool of emotion management, and even bias reduction, too. I just finished a presentation with a tech company before jumping on with you right now. And it was talking about how you can break through bias and how you can use this framework to break through bias in yourself and in others. So, again, it's the exact same thing. Acknowledge your beliefs, your emotions, how you're feeling internally, and then you're going to get curious with self-directed compassion, asking yourself, where did this come from? How did I arrive at this conclusion? And then on the third step, joint problem solving, where you're in this situation, you're reconciling the differences between your heart and mind. What is it that would make you feel better in this scenario? But then what is it that I should actually do? When I think about it logically, what is the right decision I should make in this situation? So it's really, really handy and really powerful, but intentionally simple, because if you have something that's really, really complicated, it might make sense when you read a book, but then when you go out into the real world, you're not going to use it.
It's so true. You have to. That's a very key point there. I mean, it's all well and good reading books. It's all well and good to get in theory, but if you're actually not going to go out and apply it, it's not really going to work for you, and you're not really going to get the most out of that theory. So I 100% agree with you. And I think I know one good example of you using the framework was I remember when you did a TED talk and you talked about your kids, and I think your one of your children, and then the cereal. I think trying to get them to do something. I think you gave that example in terms of using the framework, but I think at that point it was still in its conception stage, or it was still being developed. So yeah, I guess this framework can be used for so many different ways. Okay,
Definitely.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, let's dive a bit deeper into the book. So you mentioned practical tools for necessary change in the workplace and beyond. So that's like the second kind of heading, if you will, of the book. What would you say are the most common mistakes when people are discussing race in your point of view?
Yeah, I think one of the things that people often do is they let the fear hold them back. That's big, because coming into the conversation, we have to address the emotionality of it. We have to address why it's so tough to have the conversation. And this is something that you'll see both in my first book, Finding Confidence in Conflict, and this second book, How to Have Difficult Conversations About Race. We start internally. We start with you, whoever you happen to be. What is your unique personal barrier to engaging wholeheartedly? Because the biggest mistake people make is that sometimes there's something that needs to be said and nobody says anything because they're too afraid. Something's holding them back. You know, it might be a fear of being misunderstood, be a fear of being canceled or ostracized for their beliefs, whatever it happens to be. They don't engage. And then even if they do engage, that fear still holds them back from being as vulnerable and open as they need to be in order to create a true connection. So I think that challenge of managing the emotions and overcoming that fear, that's really, really important.
Okay, this is something that just popped into my head. I think is very relevant. So I'm sure you know what's happening around Kanye West, right? I don't know if you've probably been this
recently.
Yeah.
Oh no, you got to fill me in, man. Listen,
I'm sure
listen, people think I'm joking when in the book when I say I don't watch the news unless two people tell me something. So now you've said it. Let me know.
Yeah. I guess, yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I'm someone that doesn't really watch the news on a regular basis. I just get my news, you know, just throwing at me, whether it's in the gym, whether it's on LinkedIn, whether it's on Feedly, different platforms. So two things surrounding Kanye West. So one, of course, he released a bunch of T-shirts called White Lives Matter. And I think it's the reverse psychology on the Black Lives Matter thing, because you know, I don't want to get into any controversy, but anyway, he released a clothing line called White Lives Matter, and then the Black communities started an uproar around it, and he's starting to get cancelled, and you know, people are starting to threaten him and things like that, but he's refusing to step down. You have the likes of Candace Owens who's supporting him. And then what's happened also is that recently, I think JP Morgan, I've just heard today, have cancelled Kanye West, so now he has to go and take his funds to another wealth investment bank. So it's really, really crazy what's happening over here. So I guess my question to you is, you have one camp of people who are really comfortable in terms of addressing, you know, race and, you know, addressing their fears, and then on the other side you've got people who are afraid to share, how they really feel about certain themes and topics around race, and then they refuse to keep quiet. Because, for example, there's one interview Kanye also did with Fox, I think it was Fox News, and then he was talking about how when he decided to support Trump or someone like that instead of somebody else, he was getting threats from the black community or whatever, saying, hey, quickly change your opinion, otherwise we're going to do this, otherwise we're going to come and threaten your family, we're going to come and kill you, whatever. But he stood up. What do you see? I'm sure you probably don't monitor this guy a lot. I mean, we ain't got time to monitor Kanye, right? But I mean, it's just content that's just been fed to me. What do you how do you what kind of behaviors would you say, or characteristics would you say are, are quite needed to be able to kind of tackle controversy like this? I mean, to kind of deal with this kind of controversy, and then on the other hand, for those who are quite shy or scared or fearful to address racial matters um that they don't want to come out and share because they feel they're going to be threatened. How would that person address those matters? I hope that made sense. So you got one camp and
Yeah.
then you got another camp.
So I think this is an awesome case study because it shows just how tricky and messy these types of things are. And so for me, let's just bring it back to one of the key principles or beliefs that I have, is that conflict is an opportunity. Conflict is an opportunity. And before, more so than getting into like determining who's right and who's wrong at this point, I think it's really important for us to slow down and recognize the opportunity that this situation presents us with, for people like you and me and people all around the world to talk about this, because clearly this situation stirs up a lot of emotions in a lot of different people for a lot of different ways. That's fascinating, that's interesting, and that's important, that's very telling. And so I think it gives us an opportunity to speak to our values. What are those values? What is it about this situation that makes it so emotionally challenging for us to deal with? And why is it that we feel such strong emotions about it? Because if you tweak the case study, it becomes really interesting, right? Because if it's a white person who says white lives matter and has a shirt that says white lives matter, there might be an uproar, but not the same kind of uproar that comes from from Kanye West doing it for him as a black man doing it. It's really interesting. And I think it
It's very
speaks a lot to our psychology too, just the psychology of tribalism. Because whenever these types of things come up, it immediately spurs up a lot of emotionality, number one. And then people immediately start to take sides, and then they immediately start to vilify each other in the
Yeah.
interaction, right? But what's
Yeah.
really not happening is communication. True communication is not occurring. What we're doing is we're taking the opportunity to show who we are by siding with the people who believe what we believe, and showing who we are not to our tribe by attacking the people that disagree with us too. And so there's a lot of identity that's going into this, and that's one of the things that makes these conversations so tough. So one of the things I outline in the book is that the two things that make these conversations about race so triggering for everybody is, number one, identity. Who am I? What does it mean to be a person like me? And number two, morality. What does it mean to be a good or bad person? And when those two things come together in these situations, rational thought often sits at the sideline, and then we just start to attack each other. So I think I think before we start picking like who's right, who's wrong, what's the right thing to do, I think, again, just individual people like you and me, we could use this as an opportunity to talk to each other, learn from each other, and connect, instead of taking it as an opportunity to attack and pull ourselves further apart.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I guess there's more diplomatic ways to go about tackling this kind of issue or making a statement. I guess you could argue that maybe certain people want to take these actions because they want to make a statement, they want to be heard, they want the world to see, so they have to do it in such a way where the whole world sees. But I think from your point of view, there are more diplomatic and more clever ways to handle this, which can cause a lot less uproar and solve more problems. Because at the end of the day, I think your philosophy is more about okay, what's the problem we are trying to solve, and how can we get there, and what do we need to do to get there? What is the why? So I think that's what I like about your way of tackling of resolving conflict, because you always dive deeper. What is the why? Where does this come from? How can we get to the root of the matters, and how can we break this down? Okay, what would you say are some of the most common race related kind of discussions that come up in terms of like, your arena?
Yeah, great question, man. And this is let me preface my response with this, because with the book we realized that if we just said how to have difficult conversations about race and just left the title at that, I mean the book would never be done. I mean, there are too many things to talk about, and so
Yeah.
for the context of the book, we focus on the workplace, and there's a reason for that, because the workplace is an important place. I mean, we spend the majority of our waking hours at work. We spend more time at work than we do with our friends and family, which is
Yeah.
wild when you think about it in terms of the ratio. And so for
Hmm.
me, when I'm thinking about the time we spend at work, I think it should be enjoyable. I think we should be able to feel comfortable and feel comfortable being who we are in the workplace. I also think that when we're talking about the workplace, it's a very important location because we get a lot of our validation from work in one way or another. It's a source of our status, our social status in the community. It's also a source of wealth too. And so
Hmm.
I wanted to narrow down the conversation to a place where I felt like I had a little bit more credibility too, because with the trainings and consulting that we do with the American Negotiation Institute, we typically are focused on the workplace. So when I think about the patterns that I've seen, a lot of the conversations that come up deal with equity and inclusion. And so when I'm thinking about equity, I'm talking about the perceptions of fairness within the workplace, not equality, like treating everybody equally, but in terms of disproportionate access to opportunity within the workplace. And so if people don't feel as though they're being treated fairly, number one, and then they feel like they're not treated fairly because of their race, that's something that spurs up a lot of emotionality. And that's what a lot of people are seeking to address when they're having conversations about race in the workplace. The other thing is when it comes to microaggressions. So
Hmm.
microaggressions are these subtle comments that make somebody feel othered. And a lot of times they are done unintentionally, but they still have a negative impact on the other person. And so when somebody feels as though the comment is made and it's offensive and it has to do with a part of their identity, race, gender, sexuality, whatever it happens to be, in those types of situations, it becomes more hurtful. And so when you think about just any human interaction, just think about you
Yeah.
with a significant other, you and your
Hmm.
friends. Here's the thing: if you spend enough time with somebody, you will undoubtedly offend them. That's just how humans work. There's no doubt about
Mm,
that, right? But when
yeah.
you offend somebody, and you'll do that unintentionally. Okay. But if you unintentionally offend somebody and they believe that it's done because of their racial identity, that hurts more. And so when I'm going into these different workplaces, that's something that often comes up because a lot of times when somebody commits a microaggression, they don't
Mhm.
realize that they've said or done something offensive. So they continue to go on throughout their day. They don't know that they need to adjust. So it's often the responsibility of the person who has been harmed to then have that conversation and voice that concern. And that's really awkward to do. And so that's one of the things that comes up really, really frequently when I go in these different organizations and have these conversations.
That's very interesting. Yeah, I think that is a good point. I guess at least in the UK, for example, um we know, for example, in the UK, and like with the ethnic minorities, at least they know they have to work harder or twice as hard to get to a certain position compared to the not the non-black or the non-Asian person.
Yeah.
And secondly, when issues come up, or when they want to address certain rights, especially in the corporate, I see this mostly in corporate companies and enterprise level companies. Maybe not as much in small to medium companies, but I have worked in small to medium sized companies where there's been a little bit of discrimination, where I am black and then maybe the owners are of a different race, and I see this favor towards these people compared to me because of their color, and then I'm like, how can I say, if I go off and say, well, but how come he gets this and how come he gets that, and how come I don't get that? He may have a certain favor or a certain favor with the boss or whoever's up top in authority, and then they may be able to do something to get me out of my job. I'll tell you a story. Actually, I actually used to work for a Russian company a few years ago, and cut long story short, I got framed. I got framed for pretending to steal from an educational institution. Cut a long story short, I lost my job, right? I lost my job.
Mm,
Someone framed me. They pretended that I tried to wire some money from an educational institution, and essentially um I had left my computer open. I had done all of these things. It was quite stupid. I mean, to think that I was the one that did it. So of course I got evidence together. I proved them. My father's a lawyer like you. I showed it to him when he was in the country, and I took it as far as I could in the court of law, and nobody would listen to me. And I lost the appeal, and then I lost my job, and whatever. But and what reason why I'm sharing that is because the founder of the company and the managing director and of course the senior directors, they were all from like that Russia, Ukraine, that area, that part of the world. Not
mhm,
no offense to them. And then they kind of came together to conspire against me to kind of, for whatever reason, to get me out the company, because clearly everything was going well in the company for me. There must have been a sense of jealousy from someone that I was performing well, or maybe they just hate me because of the color of my skin. So they conspired against me, and then they got me out of this company. And eventually, all I was left with was a 1 month's severance pay, and then I had to go off and do something else. So yeah, I totally get it. I totally get it. And you know, when you try to have difficult conversations, sometimes the odds are against you because you're from a different race than they are, and you are you're pretty much at a disadvantage. Let's just say so. It is a difficult conversation to have because how can you go and say, oh, because of the color of my skin, oh, is it because I'm black that you're doing this to me? Are you discriminating me because I'm black or whatever? Because even though I'm doing well, it's such a tough conversation to have. Honestly, it really is. But yeah, let's keep the show going. But for those of you who are tuned in, please hit the like button if you're watching on YouTube. Leave a comment on the chat. Let us know where you're tuning in from. If you have any questions for Kwame, please do get them in the chat as we continue on with the show. Okay, cool. So, Kwame, my next question is, I mean, what would you say are some barriers to discussing diversity, equity, and inclusion? And first of all, before you even get there, I mean, what would you say is the definition? What would you explain diversity, equity, and inclusion? What would you explain um that topic as? I mean, how would you define DEI? That's what they normally
mhm.
um put as the acronym. How
Yeah,
would you define that?
it's tough. I think a lot of different people define it differently, but so I'll share my definition, right? So when I think about DEI, diversity, we're talking about the mix, the racial diversity, ethnic diversity, gender diversity, however it happens to be, the mix of the people who are within the organization. There's value to the organization to have diversity of thought, and that comes from different places. And then when we think about equity, we're talking about equal access to opportunity. So we're not talking about treating everybody equally, right? So if we're talking about treating everybody equally, like somebody who is differently situated is going to need something a little bit different given their circumstances, right? So for me, treating me the same way as somebody who uses the wheelchair is not really treating, it might be treating somebody equally, but it might not be treating everybody equitably given their circumstances. And then when we're talking about inclusion, inclusion means the feeling of belonging. So I like blending inclusion and belonging together, right? So it's like, all right, cool. I'm a diverse person. I'm of a different race, or I have a different background in whatever type of way in an organization. Do I feel comfortable there? Do I feel safe there? Because a lot of times, if we think about the distinction here, an organization might have high levels of diversity, right? Initially. So for instance, let's use a law firm, for example. What
Mhm.
they do within a law firm is that they would have their summer associates who would come from the law school. So the law firm would say, all right, these first year law students, we're going to give you a chance to be part of the law firm. And so then they become second year law students and they're still with the firm. Third year law students still with the firm. Then they graduate, they become part of the firm. Those first people at the firm, like those classes, they're typically pretty diverse. a lot of gender diversity, racial diversity, diversity of thought, whatever it happens to be. But what ends up happening is they have a retention issue because they check the box with diversity, but they don't do a good job when it comes to equal access to opportunity because people don't feel as though they could advance, or they don't check the box when it comes to inclusion. I go to the workplace, but I don't feel like I belong at all. I just don't feel comfortable here. I don't like being here, right? And so you have to check all three of those boxes. Now, when it comes to the challenges people have when it comes to these, I'm going to focus on my zone of genius here because I'm
Okay.
not coming in as somebody who's like a DEI expert or somebody who's going to focus on political correctness and call like balls and strikes, right and wrong, those type of things. I'm going to approach it from a skills expertise type of thing, because a lot of times when you think about just life in general, professionalism in general, one of the biggest things is that we don't take the time to learn how to negotiate, how to resolve conflict, how to communicate effectively, right? Because here's the thing about lawyers: people assume lawyers can negotiate really well, and a lot of them can, but a lot of them can't, because taking a negotiation and conflict resolution course, that's not required. The
Yeah,
majority of lawyers graduate never taking that course. Then you think about the undergraduate degree. How many people have had the opportunity to learn about negotiation and conflict resolution? Then you think about primary school, high school, all of that, secondary education. How many times do
very
we
true.
learn how to resolve conflict and communicate? I leave high
Mm,
school knowing how to get the area of a triangle. Cool. I don't need that. But I talk to people every single day, and I'm not taught how to do that, right? So there's a major skills issue. So if we realize that we as a society haven't been trained effectively on how to negotiate, how to resolve conflict, how to communicate effectively, and those are things that we have to do every single day in general, how then are we supposed to have these difficult conversations about one of the most sensitive issues out there? There's a
very
skills
true.
gap. There's a massive skills gap. And so that's what I'm trying to do with this book, teaching people how they can have the conversation about this really sensitive issue.
Powerful. Very, very true. Those are very, very, very true points you've just mentioned. I mean, not everyone, not, I mean, there are maybe certain people maybe taught how to acquire certain skills, and then maybe a certain race might be left out of that. So for example, one big example is, I think in the UK here, I think the wealth gaps in terms of, like, when you look at people that have properties, that own properties. So let's say the whites and Caucasians, maybe they have, let's say, an average portfolio of, let's say, 10 properties. And then look at the Asians who stick together, maybe their average portfolio is like maybe 5 properties per head. But when you look at the black people, the average black person, let's say in the UK, does not own 1 property. I think it was the Financial Times, the Guardian, the Telegraph, one of the top um publishers in the UK. They did this study, and it came out and it showed that the black people were the least advantaged in terms of wealth, having access and having knowledge, access to wealth, but and also having access to knowledge to acquire wealth. And of course, that's why you have a lot of people who are on a mission to change this narrative and make it more positive. So this is very true, everything that you're saying, Kwame. It really is. I want to thank you for explaining the DEI as well.
Yeah, my
Yeah.
pleasure. Yeah, and the examples that you gave are those specific data points are new to me because I'm not in the UK, but they are very
Mhm.
familiar because similar
Mhm.
data points exist in the United States. And
I can
so
imagine.
what I want to do with the tools of this book, I want change makers, I want advocates, people who want to make a difference and make the world a better place. I want them to use this as a guidebook for how they can negotiate and create that real change. And that's why we started that second podcast, because we have the Negotiate Anything podcast, but we also have
Mhm.
Negotiate Real Change, which focuses on how you can use the concepts from negotiation and conflict resolution to improve your workplace and improve your community and society as a whole, to make it a better place and make the world more equitable. Because when we're thinking about the real challenges that we face, if there's one targeted way that I would want to address racism or inequity in general, it would be addressing structures that perpetuate these types of challenges, right? And so if we are a lot more targeted with our approach and we focus on policy change, those type of things, negotiation is going to be a part of that process. So we need to get skilled at it so we can negotiate more effectively.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think someone said, I don't know who said it, but someone said the other day, I think three skills if you have in life, you can get pretty much anywhere. That's communication, negotiation, and sales, you know. And they're all kind of interlinked. They're all interlinked. All those three skills, they're all kind of interlinked. So that's very, very important what you said. And congrats on starting a new podcast. I'm starting a new
Thank you.
podcast this month as well. So, you know,
Hey,
soon to be
kudos.
revealed. Soon to be revealed. Soon to be revealed. So trying to get on your level. But yeah, let's have a look at the chat. Let's see if I've got any more kind of comments or points. For those of you who are listening or watching, please do get your questions for Kwame in the chat before we end the stream. We got a message from Haley. Haley, thank you for tuning in again. Real life negotiation versus contract negotiation, 100%. So true. So true. Real life negotiation versus contract negotiation. Negotiate, because the difference between real life negotiations, we use these skills every single day. You mentioned negotiation is whereby you want to get something out of the conversation, right? So
Exactly. Yeah.
every day we want to get something out of it in our jobs, in our personal lives, every single day. So yeah, I really like that point from Haley. Really, thank you so much, Haley, for sharing that point. Yeah, let's go back into your book. So I think we've emphasized on the second part of what your book means, and that is how the making the workplace more equitable, so that's more equal, if you will. And then now I want to focus more on how to have difficult conversations in race. We have touched upon that, but I want to understand a bit more. What are some of the what's some of the success that you've achieved from the book? I want to hear some stories, because I mean your book sold out. I saw you signing the book and everything. Is there any success stories that you can share?
Yeah, I think it's really cool to see how quickly the book sold out. I think it was like the fourth day of week one.
Yeah.
It's crazy to see just how excited people were to get this content. And I think what I'm realizing is that the hypothesis we had at the beginning was true. So I remember having conversations with my agent, my literary agent, talking about what we want the book to achieve, and then going out on the road, doing these book tours, showing up and actually talking to people who and giving them the book and having them interact with it. It was really cool to see some of those some of those stories emerge just how we described it, like almost verbatim. So one woman came up to me and she's like, yeah, there was this book is really, really helpful for me. I'm really excited to get into this because I've read during COVID, I recognized that there were a lot of racial inequities that I was not even aware of. So I started reading a lot of these books and learning more about it, and I became essentially woke is the way that she was describing it. And so she's like, but the problem is I would talk to people, I would try to share the information and help them to understand, but I couldn't break through. I would talk about data, statistics, all those type of things, but I couldn't get through to people. And but now I understand it was a skills issue. I didn't know how to persuade. I didn't know how to communicate on this topic. And so this is like the connection between what I've learned and then actually spreading that message to other people. And that was something that we wanted to do with the book. The next one was somebody was came up toward to the conversation, the book tour, and it was an older white gentleman. And
Mhm.
when people were talking and sharing their experiences with racism or why this was necessary because of structural racism and things like that, he was sitting in the back and he was scoffing loudly, like, no, and then he voiced his concern after a while. He's like, what he said specifically was, so does it go the other way? I was like, what do you mean? He's like, everybody talks about diversity and how we need to get more minorities into white spaces, but does it work with white people getting into black spaces? I was like, I I'm a bit confused. Can you give an example? He's like, well, think about the NAACP, so a really storied organization in the U.S. Like
Okay.
all of the leadership is black. It's the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. That's it's like over 100 years old, and he's like, the leadership's all black. And I said, well, when I think about the challenges that we're having about diversity, I don't think that at least, and you can tell me if I'm wrong on this, but I haven't heard many white people clamoring to be leaders in the NAACP. So
It's true.
if that's a challenge, then I think we could talk about that. But that's not what I've heard, and I think it comes down to the most desirable places seem to be lacking in diversity, and it comes down to power. And I said, listen, here's the thing. I might be a bad person for saying this, but if somebody comes up to me and says, "Hey, Kwame, would you like to be the CEO of a Fortune 500 company, or would you like to be the president of the NAACP?" I said, I'm a CEO of a Fortune 500 company. Are you kidding me? Absolutely. Because I have access to money, access to power, and more social status. So that's why we're having these kinds of conversations. And so now I hear the people who like the white allies and the people of color in the audience, like I see them raising their hands. They want to attack this guy. They want to attack this guy. They want to attack him. But what I did is I just used the compassionate curiosity framework. I acknowledged his emotions. I got curious with compassion and used joint problem solving right in front of him. And so I said, listen, so it's, oh, that's cool. I like that. Thank you. And so I said, listen, so it sounds like this is really something that means something to you, right? This is important to you, right? So I calmed him down using the framework, really helped him to understand these things, got a bit deeper, and then he was on everybody's side. Like he took a picture at the end with everybody. He was laughing and joking with people during the rest of the conversation. He was part of our tribe at the end. And one of the things that he said that was just what we talked about with my agent was this. He's like, yeah, I have these beliefs. I feel strongly about these things, and I want to talk to other people in my family. But like my young relatives, they come and they call me racist. They don't even talk to me. They just accuse me of things, and they don't engage. And so what I was talking about with my agent was this. I want this book to be written in a way that somebody could go to college, learn about everything that's happening in the world, and then they say, oh my gosh, my family's racist. I have to have a conversation with them. And I also want this to be a book where somebody says, my grandkid came home and said I'm racist.
That's
and powerful. I don't know how to talk to him, right? And so he was right there. He was right there in there. It's crazy. So it's really cool to see like the hypotheses actually coming out in the world, so it's catching on, man. It's a hot start with selling out of 3,000 books in week 1, and so I'm excited to see where this goes next.
Well, we'll have to give you another clap for that. Well done, man. Well done. There's a different clap for you. A different clap for that. Different clap for
Thank you.
And speaking of the book, for those of you. Okay. Yeah. Thank you. So those of you who haven't seen the book, here is a copy of the book. Why are you hiding your smile in this picture, Kwame? Why are you hiding your smile?
Listen, man, my eyes are smiling louder.
I love it. So, ladies and gentlemen, for those of you who don't know what the book looks like, this is the copy of the book. It's out everywhere. I think at the end we can tell everyone where they can go and get the book. I'm definitely getting myself a copy. If I find a hard copy in the UK lying somewhere, I will take a picture, I'll tag him and show you myself.
I appreciate that. Oh, Adrian, check this out. Check the comment. We have a really good question here.
Yeah. Let's bring. I was just about to get to that. So, wow, Haley, thank you so much for your question. She says, connected to that earlier comments on actually needing to apply lessons learned from a book, a similar situation, Kwame. How do you suggest addressing mere lip service in a work environment that is predominantly white? In other words, a professional working environment where management knows there is an absence of color, but the narrative is not transforming into an actual change. Interviews are conducted with more than qualified candidates, but nothing materializes. I've been in that situation. Coming through the ranks in terms of internships and doing great, but then no appointment is made. How do you suggest lower ranked employees create a dialogue with real change? That's a powerful question.
Yes, I love this question. I love this question.
Do you understand it? Should I keep it on the screen or can you?
No, I got it. Yeah, this is great because this is just like some of the scenarios we talk about in the book. Like this sounds like a case study. Right. And so a lot of times it's really easy to talk a big game, but it's harder to follow through. And so one of the things I talk about in the book is about holding people accountable to their own standards. The most persuasive person to a person is that same person, right? So the way I would introduce it is I would have the conversation talking about congratulating them on what it is that they said that they were going to do. Hey, CEO. I was really excited to see what you said the other day in the meeting. What you said was, we want to diversify our workforce by hiring more people of color. And that was really encouraging for me to see, because that's something that I've seen as an issue. And it's really encouraging to see that you see it as an issue too. Now, the problem is, important point, when we're making a transitional statement, for transitional phrase, a lot of times we use the word but we call but the great eraser. It just erases all of the nice stuff you said previously. And so it makes people feel a little bit sketchy, right? So I say the problem is, we've had a lot of interviews with qualified candidates and things have not really materialized. And so we've said exactly what it is that we wanted to do, and we've said it very clearly, but we haven't been able to follow through. And I want to get your thoughts on that. What is it that you think we can do to make sure that we actually follow through with that commitment? And so that's again what we're doing, compassionate curiosity. What we're going to do is we're going to acknowledge the emotion. Hey, I'm glad to see that you said this. I'm going to give you props for that. I'm going to acknowledge that emotion too. But then I'm going to transition to getting curious with compassion. I'm going to not accuse you of anything, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask you a problem solving question that's collaborative in nature. It's not you as the problem, it's you and me attacking the problem together. Right? So then you just flow through the rest of the conversation using that exact same framework. Let's say they start to get a little bit defensive. So I'll say, hey, before I continue, CEO, I just want to say, listen, I know this is something that you care about, and I know you want this organization to do well. And I can tell that. I can hear the passion in your voice. And so my goal here is to work with you to figure out a way that we can move forward. So once I see that things are starting to go off track when it comes to the emotionality and of the conversation, and things are going to steer in the wrong direction, I'm going to take responsibility to address the emotions, slow it down, and then once they start to calm down, get back on track, asking those good questions, and then leaving that conversation with some level of commitment. And so when we in the book, Haley, once you get it, so chapter 6, that's the compassionate curiosity framework. It'll show you how to have the conversation. And then chapter 8, that goes really deep into the advocacy portion. So like, how do I actually make that argument? How do I actually negotiate real change within my organization? Because not all the conversations flow really easily and nicely like that. Sometimes you have to turn up the volume a little bit, and there are strategies for that. That's just simple negotiation, but applied to creating positive change in your workplace.
Thank you for sharing that, Kwame. And Heidi, if you're listening, feel free to, go back, to Kwame's answer over and over again on LinkedIn or even on YouTube. We're also on YouTube. For those of you who are watching on LinkedIn or on Facebook, you can just subscribe and watch our channel there. Thank you, Kwame, for your answer. That was a very diplomatic way of approaching that difficult challenge there. So, Heidi, I hope you got some value from that, and hope the audience got some value from that as well. But yeah, once again, for those of you who want to grab a copy of Kwame's book, feel free to head over to his website, AmericanNegotiatingInstitute.com. Where else can everyone get your book, Kwame?
Yeah, so check it out, Amazon. We still have the Kindle version available. Audiobook coming out later this month, so that's really exciting too. But yeah, I'm not exactly sure when we're going to get more of the hardcovers. It takes some time, but hopefully later this month we can get that out in the hands of other people. So the reviews have been really positive thus far, and I hope to just keep that going. And also in the meantime, check out the podcasts. Plural now, so I have to emphasize that S, right? So we have 3 podcasts, actually 2 on the
busy
LinkedIn
guy
podcast network. Yeah, so we have Negotiate Anything. It's the #1 negotiation podcast in the world, 5 days a week. We have Negotiate Real Change, that's a weekly show, and then we have a Spanish podcast called Negociación desde cero, and that's hosted by Simon Perez. Yeah.
Repete? What did you say?
Yeah.
Is that negotiate anything but in Spanish?
No, it's negotiating from zero. So negociación desde cero. So
okay.
yeah.
You must
Yeah.
have
My
a
Spanish,
translator. You have
listen,
someone
my
that does
Spanish
that
is a
one,
little bit rusty. We got
somebody else does it.
yeah, somebody else handles that one. Yeah. So I need to practice a bit more.
That's great. And where can I get all of the links? Will they be on your website, or they just have to search?
Check out our website, AmericanNegotiationInstitute.com. That's the best way to get all of it. And yeah, if you're interested in negotiation training or conflict resolution training, leadership training, all there too.
So there you have it, guys. AmericanNegotiatingInstitute.com. Head over there. The link is on the ticker. It's just running on the screen. If you want to get a copy of Kwame's book, if you want to listen to his podcasts, if you want to get some content of his, some free resources, if you want to learn more about Kwame, everything to do with Kwame, it's on there. But before we wrap up, unless there's any more questions, before we wrap up, Kwame, tell us about how you recently done speaking on the whilst we're on the topic of podcasts, you recently did a collab or a partnership with LinkedIn. How did that come
Yes.
about?
Oh
Because you've
man,
been
it's
busy on
cool.
LinkedIn.
I've been
Yeah.
very busy on LinkedIn. Yeah, I think it just came through consistency.
Mm.
Being able to consistently grow a podcast over 6 years, making it the number one negotiation podcast in the world, and growing it to 6 million downloads, listeners into 180 different countries. Thank you. It's exciting, man. It's really cool. We got it up that big, and then I think the biggest thing was that I was always consistent on LinkedIn. And so as long as I keep on posting, I know good things happen. And so now we
Yeah.
have 80,000 followers now. And it's just
Fantastic.
because you just keep on posting, keep on adding value. And so that created a lot of trust, because
Yeah.
LinkedIn is not, they want to make sure that they're partnering with somebody where there's going to be some reciprocity. They're not just
Mhm.
going to give the platform to somebody who's kind of going to rest on their laurels. But now you saw now that we have the collaboration with LinkedIn, I'm posting even more about the podcast too.
You love it.
You
You
know,
love it.
so it's
You
a
love it.
great relationship, and they are incredibly supportive as well. So it's been a great move.
It's quite funny because I had a meeting with LinkedIn today actually, and they're very supportive because they were kind of showing us the LinkedIn sales nav stuff, and they're
Nice.
very supportive. But yeah, it's great to hear the partnership you got on LinkedIn. It's really fantastic, and you're right. I mean, I encourage everyone who is on LinkedIn, just try and do one post a day, or maybe start off with 5 posts a week. Your life will change. I mean, the amount of when I started to do this maybe 3 months ago or so, I've had so many interesting DMs and stuff. It's amazing. It will kind of take you on an amazing journey. So 6 years later, I'm sure LinkedIn has done wonders for you. We're rooting for you for 100K and above. So you're really doing a good job, Kwame. Kwame, thank you so much for your time. I don't know if there's any final announcements you want to make. Is there any last words you want to share with the audience? The floor is yours.
Yes. So, final announcement is just take what you've learned today and put it into practice. If you happen to interact with another human being in the next 24 hours, you'll have an opportunity to use the compassionate curiosity framework. So, acknowledge emotions, get curious with compassion and joint problem solving, and just practice, practice, practice. Don't make this an intellectual exercise, because then you'll do a lot of thinking and not a lot of acting. So, make sure you practice it so it becomes a lot more natural for you.
Thank you so much, Kwame. So there you have it, guys. Kwame Christian, CEO, founder of American Negotiating Institute. He's also the host of the Negotiate Anything podcast. I've got the name of the podcast on the ticker. Pull it in Apple Podcasts, wherever you listen to your podcast from. Number one negotiation podcast in the world. I do listen to it. And he's also launched 2 other podcasts, which I didn't know about. So, go onto his website, AmericanNegotiatingInstitute.com, and go and find out about it. And more importantly, go and grab the new book, how to have difficult conversations about race, practical tools for necessary change in the workplace and beyond. We did discuss this if you're just tuning in. Again, where they can get the book apart from the website, Kwame, once again, before we head off.
Yes, check out Amazon. That's the best spot to get it.
Amazon. There you go. Amazon is the everything store, as they say. So go. Oh,
Yeah.
was it Walmart? Or was it Walmart? I don't know. But anyway, go on Amazon and put the book in the Amazon. You're gonna see a lot of interesting stuff. Kwame Christian, thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much.
My pleasure, man. Thanks for having me back. I appreciate it.
No problem. No problem. No problem. And those of you listening, feel free to check us out on thesoundofacra.com or pull us on YouTube everywhere, and you'll be able to learn more about us. And yeah, we have season 4 coming up and season 5 coming up as well, which will be recorded and filmed in Ghana. So make sure you stay tuned. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, guys. We out. Take care. End the stream, Dave. End the stream.